You know, I just feel so mellowed out, man. Mellowed out on the island, baby. Let's just chill out. Let's relax. Let's relax. It is springtime. I've been talking about it. You know, it's a little chilly sometimes where I am, but you know what? I want to put my flip-flops on. I want my toes. I probably got to get a pedicure. I probably need a new pedi put on my flops this year, but I'm just, you know, like, I don't know about you, but we live on an island, you know? That's what it is.
Yeah, we need to treasure it for sure.
Gotta treasure it. Gotta treasure it. Who am I talking to? Well, I'm your boy Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector. This show is called Long Island Changemakers, and this is one of the top 5 people that I would say that I know is a change maker. Legislator Rebecca Sanin is with me. Thank you for being here.
So happy to be here.
I'm thrilled you're here, and I want to pitch a little more about you, because you are such a supporter of what I call our sector, the nonprofit sector. And in the last year, I've seen you in action in a couple different ways, really out there on the front lines advocating for our sector. And we have to go into the details so much today because I really want to tell your story. But I would just like to say boldly, on behalf of all of my friends in nonprofits, and I have several, and those of us who are vendors and solution providers to the sector, and just thank you for what you do on the front lines, because it's not lost on us to see you up there. And I joked before about the dais and stuff, but to see you there, knowing you're on our side, knowing you're doing the important work, it restores faith. And we just kind of talked about the difference between a politician versus a public servant.
Absolutely.
And for me, I'm sometimes quick, although I'm learning, I'll say, oh, well, you're a politician. And I've been corrected in the last week twice by 2 public servants. Words have meaning. And it changed my own understanding and perspective. And before we could even get into that earlier, you said, I'm a public servant, Tommy.
Absolutely.
What does that even mean then? Tell me about that.
So I don't think there's really such a distinction between folks in the nonprofit sector and folks in government if we're in it for the right reasons, which is not about our own egos, but about serving the community. We all represent our communities and making sure that we're lifting up every corner so that there can be equitable solutions that improve people's lives. In the nonprofit sector, folks go to work every day and tirelessly work to get that done. And public servants on the government side are doing the same thing, sometimes in different ways, but addressing policies and looking at some of the systems work that helps to address the symptoms challenges that we have. So hunger is a symptom, right? 65,000 children go to bed every night not knowing where their next meal is going to come from.
On this island, on Long
Island. Those children need food today. But we have to pull back and look at the systems and say, these are policy choices that need to be addressed. This, poverty is not about a lack of resources.
It's never been about a lack of resources. It's about accessibility, and I love how you say policies and systems, because I try not to curse, but what drives me crazy is how we can on this island, and I usually reference Manhattan, but how we can on this island, because it's plenty of time here, you and I can go out together. I don't know, are you a meat eater or not a meat eater?
I'm vegan.
You're vegan. So we can go to a restaurant, right, and have a very expensive vegan meal together, right, and spend a couple $100, right? Maybe you have some, maybe we have a vegan dessert after, right? And then outside, not too far, is some family, and the mom or dad is rummaging through a dumpster or a trash can to get their meal. That's a choice, right? That's a choice as a society that we've made to think, I don't want to say to think it's okay, but we look away from that.
So no response to something is an affirmative response.
No response to something is an affirmative.
So when we're not responding and we're not addressing people's needs and we don't see our humanity reflected in each other, that's a choice. And on Long Island, zip code is determinative of so many outcomes, your health outcomes, your educational outcomes, your life outcomes.
Social determinants of health, right?
100%. And while we are one of the 10 most segregated regions in the country, while we were developed that way, with black
redlining and right,
and the Levitts who had covenants to prevent black home ownership. Robert Moses, who's regional planning, aimed to keep certain folks away from the island. While all that was our inception, even though we've had a tremendous increase in diversity, we've really maintained our position as a segregated region in this country. And access is not something that everybody has, and it's something we have a responsibility to work on. And
you're not giving a history lesson. You're talking about like yesterday. Like this is real, this is now 2025, right?
Absolutely.
No, man, we're so well evolved, we figured it out. We haven't figured things out. It's public advocates and public servants like yourself that are doing that. And to hear, it's a breath of fresh air. And I've had my run-in going to town board meetings and stuff like that with some folks, and there was one situation, whatever, I'm not going to mention who it was or what it was, but it was this individual up there, I love to say this word, dais, up there on the dais, which makes me, I say it obnoxiously because I think it's obnoxious. I think it's a little bit obnoxious that we put you guys up there, not necessarily you, but all of it.
Yeah.
And you're up there and we're down here, and I've been like very quick, you got your 3 minutes and then and then but I'm like, you would never, not that I'm a tough guy, but you would never treat me that way in the neighborhood or or outside and whatever, or if we were in my place of business, you wouldn't do that. So how dare you be so dismissive? And that's not public service when I witnessed that. What are your thoughts about some of that
So,
stuff?
I mean, absolutely. Look, I think that, and I've certainly, prior to being a legislator, many times appeared before many different government bodies advocating.
And you felt how I'm talking about
I know how you're feeling, and I think government's job is not to expect people to come to us, but to go to them. And so if ever a constituent felt that they had to come to the legislature to testify in order to hear from me, then quite frankly, I'm not doing my job because I'm supposed to be in community.
You would have been in community, right?
In community with other folks.
It's not that Tuesday night or that Wednesday afternoon.
Not. And it's our job as elected officials to solicit information, to be out asking the questions, and to make sure that our work is representative. That's the purpose of being elected, is to represent your people. And quite frankly, I look at that work and policy making as a way of loving our neighbors.
Yes.
When we're doing it the right way, when empathy is valued as a superpower and a credential, then it really is about public service.
I knew you from afar. You were probably like, who's this guy? Why is he trying to talk to me? I'm kidding. No, it's so funny that people go, Tommy D knows everybody, which is not true at all. But I know 400 or 500 people, right? I just happen to go in the same rooms where those people are a lot. So I'm at this event. Shout out to Dan Lloyd and his colleague Drew over at Minority Millennials. I was at the Coliseum the other night. I run into a friend of mine named Don Levine, and Don goes, this guy, Tommy D, he knows everybody. I look around that room, I knew 7 people. One of which was our very good friend, Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, who's been here in the studio. And, he was there, but I didn't know a lot of people. I saw Vanessa Beard-Streeter was there. So we talk a lot about public service from the perspective of what you do now as a legislator. However, your leadership role at the Health and Welfare Council of Long Island, can we focus in a little bit about public service and what it means to you?
I mean, I certainly was raised in a socially justice-minded family, where
socially justice-minded.
Where I was taught about my.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Nassau County. Was always taught about taking care of your neighbor, serving your country, being respectful and being kind, and the power of kindness and the expectation.
Always.
I would never get in trouble if I missed curfew, but if I wasn't kind to a kid in school, that would be something where I would be certainly spoken to.
You have siblings?
I do.
And this is and all your siblings have the same response?
We were all raised that way, absolutely. When I was 16 years old, I went on something called the Youth Service Opportunity Project in the city with one of my best friends, where you essentially sleep at a homeless shelter for the night. You cook.
At 16?
Yeah. It's with a program. It's a program that takes you. You cook food at a pantry, to provide at a soup kitchen, and you learn everything about homelessness. You're sort of, immersed in it for a weekend.
A weekend, not just the night.
No, I think it was I think it was 2 nights.
Wow.
And I came home and really believed as a young kid that there was a secret that I knew, because if other people knew the secret, there was no way homelessness would exist. And I was...
You were exposed to something, and it was a blessing for you to realize that.
Yep.
It's interesting. So I grew up not far from here. I grew up in Nassau County. I grew up in Franklin Square, middle class, whatever, right? I went to private high school. My brother and sister didn't. It just so happened that I did. And I just try to give you context, but my father worked for the phone company. My mom always had jobs. They always had to have 2, sometimes 3 incomes just to make it work, right? And I don't live in Franklin Square. I live up on the North Shore now. And I don't think, and now my kids come out and they volunteer with me all the time. My youngest guy is always like, Dad, when are we doing the next day of service? Which to me, forget about 10 years old, it blows my mind. He wants to do days of service. It's great. I've exposed them to a lot, but not what you're talking about, not that context. I say, Garden City and Hempstead are it's right there, man.
There's a traffic light on Washington Avenue, and if you're on one side, You know, your trajectory is very different than the other in terms of your experiences.
So how did that just shape that secret?
It just had a huge, because I felt like I had this secret, and then I found out I didn't, and that lots of people knew about this, and just turned a blind eye. And I went home that weekend. Again, I was a teenager and tried to give away everything I owned because I didn't want it anymore. And then began volunteering, you know, and that sort of shaped the life of volunteerism.
That was like it. Was that weekend? Was that encouraged by your parents? Was it a school program? Like, how did that even come up?
You know, it's a good question. I think it was our parents, but I don't really remember. I was, 16.
No, I was like, I wonder if it was a district thing or like how.
No, it wasn't a school district thing.
It wasn't?
No.
No kidding.
But it was really life-changing for me. And in fact, there was a young man who I wrote my college essays about. His name was Junior. He was 6 years old. In the food pantry, and to this day, so many years later, I remember him so vividly. And it was Christmas time, it was December, and I was wearing a Santa hat as I was giving out food, and he liked it. And I said, well, let me give it to you, and I gave it to him, and he was so excited, and he told me when he grew up, he was going to be a preacher. And I asked him why.
At 6?
At 6. And he said, because I want to give people hope. And this was a boy who was on a line getting his only meal for the day. And that profoundly changed me and reminded me of the extraordinary power of the human spirit and the importance of, you know, my ability to look at you and see your humanity reflected back at me and understand that we come from different places, but we all do better when we all do better. And that's what nonprofit work is all about, and that's what public service is about, is improving the lives of all of our neighbors.
I love how you're defining public service and nonprofits so similarly, because
very similar. I mean,
but I don't think everybody sees it that way. Even just recently, you know, we had an event, and Assemblyman Ed Ra was there, and he was speaking, and we had Tom Muscarella was there, and I know these men on the surface, right, and Mr. Muscarella kept saying, I don't have the answers. There's all these animal advocates in the room, and he share with me, teach me, educate me. I'm telling you, it wasn't a politician. He hung around. All these people with different issues came over and spoke to him, and that to me that's a public service situation.
And by the way, you know, this is something I'm very passionate about. A big part of why I ran for office was seeing that we didn't have enough partners in government who understood human services.
When you were on the other side.
When I was on the other side. That we needed folks in government who understood the human services system, but also just understood the rawness of what so many of our neighbors face every single day and the challenges, and that policy can, and serving people the right way can be an antidote to those challenges. We need more folks who are educators, teachers, union folks, nonprofit executives to run for office. You know, so that we can have people representing folks who really understand and have experience circumventing some of those challenges.
So it sounds to me like it was more that you wanted to make change than that you wanted to be in that political arena, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it was more that. So
it wasn't
not an ego thing, it's a service thing.
There's no ego. I think it's always about being driven by service. And you know, when I've had opportunities, whether it was, you know, becoming the CEO at Health and Welfare Council or joining the legislature or other things I've done in my life, that's what I reflect on before I make a decision.
How can I serve?
Whether or not this is really going to maximize what I see are my strengths in service, and can I really help people in this role in a way that's meaningful?
Wow. So when are you a person who projects into the future a number of years and tries to strategize or ascertain where those services can best be used, or is it more as opportunities rise in front of you, you say, then you assess what's the best fit?
I think you should always have strategic hope in your life, whether it's for yourself or for your community. But I'm a big believer in letting life teach you and letting life lead you, and being open and inspired by the things that you experience. And so many choices I've made in my life are not based on any kind of forward planning, but are based on, you know, an experience in the moment, and then using that experience to learn and to determine what comes next.
Thank you for everything you're doing. I mean, seriously, I'm grateful because, and I'm blessed to have people like you around, because I'm able to continue to learn. And it's funny, people have said to me, you know, you should probably like run for something. And I go, I might run for the bus. Like if my car's not running, like I might do that. But the thing for me has always been, in my experience, the way I've experienced these situations and these scenarios, is it doesn't look like somebody I'd want to be. But when I look at you and I see you in these roles, I go, oh, she's making the world better. She's making change. That's when it's all about paradigm. And if I see this paradigm where these people are rude and dismissive and they don't want to help people, well, who the hell wants to be that? Like
100%.
I never went to cooking school because I grew up in restaurants, right? My uncle had a place not too far from here. I was a bartender, I was a waiter, all this stuff. And I wanted to be a chef at one point. But the chefs were always jerks and everybody hated them. So I was like, I can't do that. I like everybody liking me. I want to make friends with people.
Yeah.
So that, but when I saw you over the last summer and stuff like that, and there was some scenarios going on, and we had a lot of our colleagues there speaking, it was just like having a guiding force up there on that dais that I picked on a little bit, but having you up there, I knew we had a teammate with us. So.
No, I appreciate that. Look, I think there is so much that is painful that is happening in government right now. I think a lot of people are tuning out because they're completely overwhelmed, and that is a risk that we take as well. We need to tune in, but we need to tune into our opportunity. We need to tune into strategic hope and recognizing that we the people are always more powerful than anyone in elected office. Nonprofits are under, very consistent attack at every local.
Why do you think that is? At
every level of government.
Yeah.
Right now, I think a lot of what's happening at the federal government is about, prioritization, and the priority are not the services or the people who need those services in this country. But unfortunately, we're talking about, cataclysmic cuts. You're talking about, Medicaid, which, your whole, substance abuse and mental health infrastructure, our aging population who deserve to end their lives with care and dignity. Medicaid is what most folks use for nursing care because it's too expensive to afford a long-term care plan for most of our neighbors, for many of us.
Yeah.
And so, I think a lot of people are saying government is ugh, and I can't tune into it. But we have to remember that I keep talking about this concept called anticipatory grief. The idea that I feel a lot of folks in our country are mourning the loss of what they are used to, American values, the way they want to interact, the services that they count on, like Social Security, that they've been paying into their whole life. And so they're grieving something that we haven't lost, and we have to. So
they've already given up the fight, is what you're saying?
They feel so much pain. They can't turn on the TV anymore. They don't trust the TV anymore.
I don't watch any of it, personally. I'm telling you, I can't.
Many of us are having to change how we interact with information, right? And that's okay. It's important to take care of yourself, but it's really, really important to tune in and to show up, because the services that are on the chopping block and the people and the nonprofit organizations, these provide the infrastructure for what we value as Americans, for having a country that is whole and healthy, where people can live the American dream. And so I think it's so important to hold on to that concept of strategic hope. And
where do you find that? Because I'll tell you, like, sometimes I'll go down, I'll make a cup of coffee in the kitchen, and I'll say, Alexa, turn on the news, right? And now there's probably an Alexa somewhere in this building. It's start turning on the news. But it's like, it's gotten to the point where you can't, I feel like you can't trust anything. I don't even know where to go for the information, right? And I'll say, like, I'll give my wife, for example, like, she has been tuned out of this stuff for a long time. And I tried to stay as engaged as I can. And I'm very engaged in stuff that happens locally. It's like, I don't know where to go to get the right information. Social media is a killer, right? And it's like, there's all these echo chambers. How have you found, and especially somebody with your finger on the pulse of locally certainly what's going on, and you have to be aware of on the state level and on the federal level.
Right.
What do you have any suggestions of where to go to get access?
I mean, what I encourage people to do is, aside from listening to lots of sources, if you're able to, or reading. A lot of people today are, reading their news instead of, because it's a little too overwhelming to turn it on. But also to look at our nonprofit organizations that focus on this. So like the Brennan Center, Medicaid Matters, which is a coalition in New York State that provides really important work. CSS New York that is putting out data about how Medicaid cuts will impact each different congressional district across the state, looking at the information of folks who do this every single day from an advocacy perspective, and whose sole focus is helping other people.
That's great. Yeah, again, so this makes me think, what was it, Medicare? Was the
Medicaid Matters.
Medicaid Matters. So this is, sorry to interrupt you, but this is a thing where that tells me, some of this I want to talk about later on, and you say, you know what, Tommy? you should probably interview these people and help use my reach to help educate, because in the Brennan Center I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah, there's so many organizations across the country that do this work, and the report, if I'm looking at hunger research, I'm looking at FRAC, there's so many different organizations.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the important thing is to stay tuned in, right? And to figure out what it is you do trust, and to stay tuned in and figure out how you can use that information, not to get tired and sad, but to be inspired and use it towards action.
Because you can, and we are tired, and we can get scared because it is a lot.
It's a lot.
But we have to find, and I say the other night, I just saw Attorney General James just like so amplified and so animated, and loved it. It was so great. And I will tell you, as somebody who knows things aren't going great, sometimes I just keep going all my life.
The way you deal with the darkness is you turn on the light. And that's what our Attorney General does, right? And that's what we all have a responsibility.
We need a lot of light.
We need a lot of light, and people need to reach inside themselves and shine that light. And you make a difference not just by being in elected office or working in a nonprofit. You make a difference when you on a day like today that's cold and rainy, you go next door and check on your elderly neighbor.
On people. We have to check in on each other.
Or, at the bus stop being thoughtful to someone who's standing there, or at the grocery store when a child is throwing a tantrum, not to, provide nasty looks, but to offer support. It's about recognizing that we're in community together.
We are.
And we're all connected to each other. And if we want our lives to be better, the best way to make your life better is to serve other people.
And I've said that before, and it's like a secret, over the years, like I love going out and volunteering and doing service, and everybody thinks it's so selfless, but those of us who tend to do it, you go, I feel so much better.
Yep.
And when I'm blue and I'm having my own challenges, if I can go and give back and show that love and that compassion, and I don't want to be like corny, man, and cheesy, but you know what? Like, I think this breaks down to that. It's when we can find love and compassion for the person to the left and to the right of us. And I think about what's going on down there in Washington, for whatever I know about and I'm aware of. I'd love for them to go spend that weekend in the pantry. Love for them to go do that. Get it.
But yes, and.
Yeah, tell me.
Yes, and we need to elect people who want to lead from a perspective of empathy.
Yeah.
Because there are plenty of people who could have the same experience and walk away from it.
Right, so it might not even matter.
So it might matter for some folks, and it might not for other folks, right? But we have a responsibility. Look, people don't want to run for office right now because of the challenges of our time. There's a lot of sort of reticence of, I'd like to run, but maybe in 5 years, we need leaders today. We need people who want to shine their light bright today. We need people who recognize that, you don't need to be the best at this, and this to do it. You need to have a heart of service. And you can learn. And I learn every single day.
I'm sure
There's
you do.
not a day that I don't come home knowing that I've learned something new, and that I've not only learned something new that impacts my life, but that I can use it to help some other form of my constituency.
Yeah, I saw you out on, so my dad owns the Rouse Italian Ices on New York Avenue in Huntington, and I wasn't there that day, but I saw pictures on social media. I saw you for the St. Patrick's Day Parade over there. And I see you in community. I see you doing cool stuff. You do these like cute videos on Instagram and stuff, and I like that because it's humanizing what this is all about. And just a comment, I marched in the Bayside St. Patrick's Day Parade a couple weeks ago, and I went out and I had a emerald green jacket on, and I went to the florist. I called the florist ahead of time, and I had them make me a boutonniere and the whole thing. And I just think, like, in life you make choices, and I wanted to march in that parade like I was the Grand Marshal, and like I just wanted to have fun and enjoy it. So I show up at events with flowers on my lapel, and I'm not the honoree.
Right.
I just want to be like, let's go, let's party. This is one life. Like let's have fun with it. But I notice you have a lot of fun, you and your team, with the social media and stuff like that.
Well, we really try to, I think how you share information is important, and how people can receive information is important. So we try to make sure that we're doing things like creating videos that teach people about opportunities in the community, that invite people to events, and that celebrate the community. There's a lot of people hurting right now, and the more that we can sort of amplify the positive aspects of our world, the more we're helping other people. And we have to do that. We have a responsibility to do that.
We do. How do you see, do you think there's folks that are not educated about the needs of others? Let's just talk very like hyper-local. Let's talk Long Island, and then maybe even hyper-local to the areas you cover in your work. Do you find when you're building alliances and educating folks that people are unaware that there's people experiencing homelessness, that there's 65,000 young people on Long Island that are food insecure?
65,000, yeah.
65,000 people that are the children, right? 65,000 children that are food insecure on Long Island. Do you find that people go, really? Or what is, you know, what's your
I mean, I think there's a lot of information that people don't have when they're making decisions, and that's why it's important to keep talking about that information.
Yeah.
I think that for some people, it's to your point earlier about the experiential learning, that they need to sort of have an experience with something to be impacted. But I also think, you know, we all have an opportunity and a responsibility to impact ourselves. I mean, there's so many cultures on Long Island. There's so many demographics on Long Island. There's no way to know everything that's impacting everybody. But but you have to try and you have to want to.
Well,
and that's
some of the bigger ones, though, are like safety concerns and food and housing. I mean, you know, we can work on other stuff, but like those I would think are paramount, right? Do you have somewhere warm to stay? Do you have food? Right? Do you have clothing? You know, I think there's a pecking order there.
Absolutely, without a doubt. But every community has different ways of interacting with that. So, you know, if you're on the East End and we live in a place of incredible geographic sprawl with no public transportation, you know, how you get folks the resources they need and then help them, again, not just the symptoms, because that, you know, we can all hand out food.
Back to systems,
but then how do we change those systems so that that person doesn't live a life of suffering and they can live their best lives? How do we improve people's access to education? How do we improve young people's access to apprenticeships and opportunities in the vocational?
Which was great what I saw with those guys the other night, the minority millennials in their policy and culture stuff, because I saw a lot of the folks from the unions there getting access, and that was great. I was very unaware of what they were doing. I've met Dan Lloyd, but I was not really aware, and it was really an eye-opener. Have you collaborated with them?
Oh yeah. I've worked with Dan for many years. And listen, there are so many extraordinary leaders on Long Island. Like that's something we should be celebrating and being proud 100%. Of as well. Whether it's, you know, in the nonprofit sector, are some of our educational leaders that are doing extraordinary work on social emotional learning and mental health issues in their schools. You know, our union leaders who are working hand in hand sometimes with our human services sector to make sure that laborers are getting what they need. And that synergy is celebrated. I mean, these are aspects of our region that we should be so proud of.
I'd love to find ways, and we talk about this another time, but ways we can maybe celebrate these folks together. If there's a way, again, you know, the Long Island Imagine Awards coming up, a great light is shown on the sector, the nonprofit sector. However, just more general individuals, and that's part of what this show is about. You know, it's highlighting folks, but there's just not enough hours in the week for me to get everybody on the show to do this. But I think there's ways where, you know, if you're going to spotlight somebody in the community who's done one thing, I want to know about it so I can be there and we can, you know, collab and do that. We're running out of time. Anything else you want to leave people with?
Just tune in.
Right?
Keep tuning in, keep trusting, you know, that voice inside of you to do good, to help others. That's how we make a difference. And even in these really hard, what might feel like very dark times, there's reason to have strategic hope. And if you keep tuning in and showing up together, you know, we the people is a lot stronger than folks like me sitting at the horrific dais that you talked about.
Yeah, I beat up on the dais so bad. You know, I see a day where we have no more daises. That's what it is. Thank you for being my friend.
Oh,
thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Long Island Changemakers. I have the coolest friends. Deal with it. That's just how it is. Strategic hope, right? That's what you said. We're going to have strategic hope. This has been another episode of Long Island Changemakers. I am your buddy Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector. This is another In Focus production. I'll see you later on. Bye, gang.